Welcome, everyone, to the Unboxing Careers podcast, the show dedicated to discovering what different careers are actually like. I'm your host, Greg Zachwitz. On today's episode, we dive back into the world of mental health with Jennifer Maloney, licensed clinical social worker, or otherwise known as an LCSW. So, Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's do a little level setting if we can, Jennifer.
Sure.
Quickly tell us about your practice, if you have a specialty that you like to, most of your clients fall under, but walk us through kind of where you sit currently.
Okay. So I see adults only currently. I started my career seeing teens and children and families. Right now I'm adults 18 and over and couples. I don't really have like a specialty per se. It's more along lines of anxiety, depression, grief and loss, relationship challenges, maybe a life transition, so to speak. That's kind of where my clients fall into now. Estrangement from family is another one. It's kind of become a big one recently.
And you mentioned that you used to work with it's younger people. I don't know if it's adolescents or children or whatever. But
yeah.
Okay. So is there a reason you focus on adults now?
It kind of became a natural consequence really after I had my son and I went part-time. It became harder to schedule adolescents because they tend to be a little bit busier than adults.
Makes sense.
So, they really weren't around on weekends. And I realized I really like working with adults, as I'm a parent, but you don't have to do it with the parents, which is nice when you have the adolescents. A lot of times, they're really the parents should be in therapy over the kids. So not that the children shouldn't be in therapy, but so I realized I really didn't. I didn't mind it, and I also got older, and it became, I think, harder for them to relate to me, to seeing me as someone who, when I was in my 20s and early 30s, they could maybe believe that I was a teenager, and that kind of got harder as I got older. And I kind of found that as I got older, I really like that, like young, like right out of college age is a fun age group to work with. So that kind of graduated to that.
Yes. Perfect. And every therapist we've had on so far has some sort of experience in their life that has took them to the mental health field.
Sure.
A couple questions around like choosing a career. Is this something you fell into naturally? Have you always been interested in kind of mental health and psychology? Was there something in your either childhood or adult life that kind of took you there? What made you decide to go into this as a career?
Sure. So every time I took any kind of like aptitude test, it would say helping profession. And so when I was in college, my college where I went did not have a social work bachelor's degree. So I was a sociology major, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do after graduation. So I took an internship working with the Foundation to Prevent Child Abuse. And I thought I really wanted to work with kids and kind of be out in the community. And I liked doing that, but I met someone, actually I had a mentor there. I did it in the internship. And she said, get your master's social work degree. It'll make you so much more versatile. And you can do anything in that field, really. She's like, you can do administration, you can do clinical, you can do community work, you can bounce back and forth. You can have 3 part-time jobs, whatever you want to do. She said, but that's the best degree she recommended. So I started researching that and then getting my license. And so I did that. I went to graduate school right after I graduated college. I worked to get my clinical license. And I worked at a residential and a school initially while I was getting my supervision hours to get my license working with adolescents. And that was, great experience. And then I started working in outpatient and I loved it. I loved helping people come in, connecting with people, listening. And I also love making my own schedule. I mean, that was a great bonus to the job too. So, and just been doing that ever since.
And typically I ask, like, what's a typical career or education path for someone? So this is, I guess there's a couple ways to do this, but if you had to, maybe this is the way I'll ask it, is if you had to go back and do it again, what is the path that you think you would take, or is it the exact same path?
Sure. I probably would have maybe not done sociology if I knew I was going to go into something like social work. I probably would have applied to schools that maybe had a bachelor's program in that, or I would have applied to schools that had some kind of counseling psych degree, because those are the courses I actually I ended up taking some counseling psych degrees when I was an undergraduate to kind of help me. Those are the classes that provide uh, the beginnings of the clinical skills and the micromanagement the micro skills you need, and also kind of the foundational skills you need. Sociology was kind of very theories, and I didn't really have exposure to the things that maybe would have helped when I first went to graduate school. So I would say, if you think you want to do that, maybe get the bachelor's of social work, or a degree in counseling psych, and then you can kind of decide on your master's program. Do I want to do counseling psych? Do I want to do social work? Kind of research that way and what you want to do. But I would probably focus more on my bachelor's, I guess, if I had to do it over again on a different bachelor's.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So, this question I normally save for later. You touched on a couple of them here, so I'm just going to jump in and we'll bounce around a little bit if we can. So, you mentioned a couple of those essential skills, and you mentioned a couple levels, or I don't know if that's the right word, but like hard skills, soft skills, right? Different things. What are some of the skills that makes for a good psychologist? So, someone going into this field, and there's a couple ways you can kind of answer this. One, things that have helped you, maybe skills that you don't necessarily learn going through that major, but just life skills, right? Something, or maybe something you learn at a different course. But also, if there's skill, this is probably more of a trait thing about things that, like, hey, if you have these traits, you're probably not cut out for this role, right? Because every job has their different stressors, things like this. So it's a loaded 5-way to ask you multiple questions at once. So my apologies, Jennifer.
That's okay. That's okay.
But let's talk through some of those skills. We can talk about attributes in there, but walk us through some of those things.
Sure. You have to be an active listener, so you have to be listening to understand is the biggest thing. You shouldn't be thinking about what you're going to say next. You should be present in that moment with them, whether it's, now I'm on telehealth. So whether you're on Zoom, or any kind of other platform, or whether you're in person with them. So you need to be able to hear what they're saying and understand that it's about them and not you, so you have to be able to, they may say things you don't like or you necessarily don't agree with. But you're there for the client and to help them. And so you have to put all of your stuff aside. I think in the beginning, it really helps to have, even after you get your license, strong supervision. I mean, that has even helped me now, because we all get tough cases, or you might have what they call countertransference, where it stirs something up, what the client is doing stirs something up in you, whether it's from your childhood, or you don't agree with what their political beliefs are, or you don't agree with how they're managing their life, and so you need to sometimes seek counsel from other, professionals. And that's really the first thing in social work they'll tell you is, if you're ever stuck somewhere with something, go seek supervision from someone who has experience in that. They may have less experience from you overall, but maybe they have experience in trauma or something else. Go and seek that out, and that's really beneficial. You also have to be able to know if you need a break yourself. So, if you're feeling under the weather, but you're thinking, I can get through the day, that's okay. But if you're really sick, or your mind is maybe focused on, if you have your own family emergency or something, it's okay to take a few days off, reschedule everybody, because you have to, again, you want to be present and not have that stuff in the back of your mind for your client.
Makes sense. How big is empathy?
Yes. Sorry, I was getting to that. Yeah. Empathy is huge. Empathy is huge. So thank you. That was mine. That I did have that in my brain. Empathy, you have to be able to, and that's coming back to working with people that, maybe you haven't shared, they come from a different part of the world, or were brought up a different way, or they're, like I said, living their life a different way, or you have to be able to It really doesn't matter, I guess. And this is an example someone said to me, like whether someone lost their mother or they have a hangnail, like they're coming to you for counseling. You need to show them empathy. You shouldn't say, oh, it's just a hangnail. You have to be able to put yourself in their shoes, understand why is this is, bothering them, and really try to understand them. And you also have to be able, if they feel like maybe it's not a good fit and they communicate with you, you have to be able to take that feedback and say, okay, like, what can we do? I always ask my clients at the end of a first session, like, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want me to know? Did I miss something? And doing check-ins. But, just doing those, and empathy can be shown just by saying things like, gosh, that sounds really hard. I'm so sorry. Even those like minimal encouragers really mean a lot. Irving Yalom said that he was a big proponent. I studied him in graduate school with groups and families of, like one of his clients said, the best thing you did for me was hand me a tissue. So it's really sometimes that simple.
Is that a tough, it's not a skill, right? It's more of an attribute, but it can certainly be hardened and lessened over time, experience, age, wisdom, all these type of things. But is it a hard thing? Like if you're younger, let's just say you're a teenager, right? Or maybe 18, like first year in college, and you are not overly empathetic. Maybe it's because you had a tough upbringing. Maybe it's one of those things where you just always had to do it like you were on your own and had to just get stuff done. So is it something that can kind of soften over time that you can learn as you go through courses? Or have you found in your experience that if you're not empathetic when you're 18, probably not the best career for you?
I do think it is a natural quality that some people just have more of, and it's probably going to benefit you in the long run and be able to do this and not maybe have burnout as much, unless you're working with a certain population. Some people like just love kids and they don't want to do adults, and that's fine. And so I think when you're more of a generalist like me, you have to be able to have that empathy translate to, I see lots of different people and ages, and they come from different backgrounds and educational experiences. Maybe if you just love working with families, or kids, maybe it can be something that, you have to have it, but maybe it can be learned, or maybe you really just like working with them so much that it's more natural for you. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But I do think it has to be. I do think some people would probably not be good at that. And I think part of it would just be they would just probably tell people it's not about giving advice. And I think some people, when maybe you don't have as much empathy, you would just want to give them advice and say, you know what, this is what you need to do. A lot of it is about the language too. Like you wouldn't say that you use, which I think people, when you have empathy, how to phrase things a little bit better. Hard. Sometimes we have to say hard things. I have couples that you have to say hard things to. But you want to be respectful and have empathy and say, I know you're really trying, but this is what I'm seeing. And so I'm like, the problem with you is this. So I think when you have empathy, it's more about how you're phrasing things too. But I do think it's a natural skill. I was the friend that everybody went to for advice. So while that's not what I do in my job, I think it did become like nobody was surprised I became a therapist, if that makes sense.
Do they still come to you for advice?
They do, but sometimes I just have to say, see somebody else.
Very good.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, let's transition from kind of school to entering the workforce here. So someone coming out of school, they're ready to start working. I know this is going to vary based on state, kind of what their specialty is, what they want to get into, but do you have some experience of how you went into it with some of those first jobs? And other people we talk to, they usually they don't just go into either private practice or just a specialized firm. Some work in hospitals, some work wherever.
Sure.
What is, quote unquote, typical, knowing it's not typical, but like what's a traditional entry-level career path for someone who's going into this field?
I would say if they're getting their bachelor's. A lot of it might be like working in children and youth, maybe working for the state governments. There's, positions there. There aren't a lot of maybe clinical jobs. Sometimes there's mobile therapy positions that organizations will do, or like behavior specialists, things like that they can do. Um, I went right on to get my master's. So I was looking for clinical jobs, but I didn't have my clinical license yet because you need 2 years of supervision and 2 years of work experience. So, I worked at a residential, certainly working at a hospital. I mean, doing medical social work is a whole different ballgame too, because you're dealing with, you have to have empathy, but you also you don't really have, it's clinical, but it's not, because you have so many cases to work with, so it's kind of like admin and a little bit of clinical, but you still have to have that empathy piece in there. I think you always have to have that, no matter even if you're doing admin. So you could certainly work in a hospital. I know that they have like dialysis clinics hire master's level social workers. Cancer centers do, anywhere where you need someone to kind of help through the process of something. Schools hire social workers. And like we said, hospitals, governments, and then residential treatment centers of the correctional system. My first internship was actually in a correctional facility when I was in grad school. So they hire them. And then once you're getting your supervision, if you want to become licensed, whether it's as a clinical psychologist or as a social worker, you would need to do supervision. And then, you can, I think the biggest thing is a lot of people want to start their own practice right away. And my advice would be join a group practice, even if it's small, just to see how it goes. And then you can always start your own. I waited 3 years to start mine. And that was great because I learned what works, what doesn't work. You learn how to kind of like what paperwork you need to have, what you need to have for the business and all of those things. What do you want to offer that wasn't offered to you here, the type of clients. But I think it always helps because it can be a lonely profession once you do this. And I think it's good to have that support early on when you're doing the clinical work, the outpatient work.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially if you're private practice, right? You don't have
right.
quote unquote colleague. Like you don't have that person to turn to me and like, hey,
yeah. And yeah, even if you have, like in the beginning, I had a couple of partners I worked with. That was great, but we never saw each other because every time we worked, we were in session together. So you'd have to kind of make time to get together to talk about things.
Yeah. You mentioned going to school, whether it's master's or having your, I think you said 2 years of supervision.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're going through that process, if you look back now, or say I'm your son and I'm talking about going to this, any tips or things that you learn that you think is invaluable for people to know during those phases that maybe people don't tell them or maybe they don't know?
I think if you're going through that process, you want to realize that maybe to not close yourself to working with certain populations, because I was younger when I started, I got a lot of kids and that was great, but I thought I wanted to work with families. So I got a lot of families, but I didn't really get the exposure to working with individuals as much. And so I think you don't really want to limit yourself. Like I want to, I was like, I'm going to work with families and I'm going to, really help families. And that was great, but that didn't really translate well into the outpatient world. And so I think you just want to be open to working with different ages, different populations to see, it's good to have that, and you can pull your skills are going to be used everywhere. But I wouldn't, limit yourself. And I think if you want to, it's okay to bounce around, I think, at the beginning too. If you want to work at a hospital for a little, then you want to try something else, you're going to gain valuable experience. And social workers do kind of sometimes bounce around a little bit. And I think that's good to gain, because whatever experience you get, you can always take it with you to your next job.
Yeah. So on that front, is there a way when you are in school studying this to kind of get that exposure to different age groups to figure out what you might like before you actually get out into the real world?
Sure. I think it's definitely important to pick the right internships. My master's program, we had to do two.
Okay.
And I I wanted to pick an internship. The graduate school I went to was about a 45-minute ride twice a week. And so I said, do you have any internships that are kind of closer to where I live? Because everything was kind of based where the school was. And they said, well, we have one, and it was at the correctional center and drug and alcohol program. And I thought, what do I want to do? Drug and alcohol. But it was the best clinical experience I could have asked for. The people there had really great clinical skills. And I mean, my first exposure to group therapy was like 20 inmates. I mean, which, you know, it was amazing. It was the best experience because you had to learn quick, but I had people there to help me and mentor me. And I thought, wow, if I can handle this, so that was good. And I took that chance, I took that internship. So I say, take a chance even if you feel like I'm not quite sure about this. Maybe think out of the box a little bit when it comes to, but get a good internship. And I would definitely say interview. Like I paid the internship, like that was the tuition that I had to pay for that class. So you're paying for it. So as much as they're interviewing you maybe for the internship, you should be interviewing them. And really look around.
That's really good advice. I'm going to get into your typical day and week here in just a moment, but we're talking about careers a little bit here. So you mentioned that you recommend at least doing a couple of years before you go into private practice. It seems like a lot of psychologists, not the end goal, but like they prefer going into private practice at some point. I think it's a little more flexible for them, control it. But it's obviously not for everyone, right? Some people don't want to do that.
Sure.
What's a typical career advancement? So I know this will depend if you're going to corrections or going into, group therapy or something, but someone going into it, what should they realistically expect? Say they, can you advance pretty high in a practice, or is it really just billable time where you're just growing your client base and that's it? So, and maybe what I'm really asking is like, where do people see themselves going and how does the salary expectations match along with that advancement?
Sure.
Does that make sense the way I'm asking it?
I think so, yeah. So really, if you're in a practice, I think the only way you could advance if you don't own it would be to maybe be like a clinical supervisor, if the practice was large enough to have that. So that would be someone that provided supervision for, if you were having an issue with a client, or they kind of managed the clinician, so to speak. I don't know if that's really there aren't a lot of large practices that I know of anymore. So I don't know that that's a job that many practices have, I think though, if I was going to do a role like that, I would still want to keep some clients for myself, just to kind of keep my clinical skills going, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I do think though that there are, with all of these different therapy platforms that are hiring therapists, as like 1099 contractors, they definitely probably have the roles of a clinical supervisor, because you need someone that's going to, like, you manage the therapists in Pennsylvania, you manage the ones in Ohio, or you manage the social workers because you have a social work degree, you manage the counselors, because you have the counseling degree. Or you take this because the platforms have become so big that they probably have more of that kind of, I'll call it like the old school. Like the first practice I joined, they had like 10 offices and they had a clinical supervisor at every office, but those don't really exist. With insurances now the way it is, they don't really exist that much anymore. So I think you'd have that. There are a lot of remote jobs too that are available for social workers too. So I don't know that there's and I guess if you're working in like an organization, if you're working at a hospital or some kind of residential, the natural progression might be to go into management, I guess, if you wanted to. But, a lot of clinical social workers that are doing work in private practice, they might on the side do like adoption home studies, or they might do immigration evaluations, or they might work part-time being a clinical supervisor for a platform, and supervising clinicians, or doing group therapy. It's kind of the COVID kind of brought remote social work, like there's all of these positions now. So it's kind of like this, there's even positions too where you can like supervise, like some nurse practitioners in some states, they need to have mental health exposure. So sometimes social workers will have them kind of shadow them in their day too. So there's so much out
would
there.
it be would it be fair to say that as people's salaries or income increases with more seniority, is it really just getting the experience and then charging clients more with the outside of like your traditional, step ladder business organization, right?
Yeah.
Where
So insurance. So if you take insurance, which I always say in the beginning, if you're going to start a practice, take insurance. You're not going to be able to have enough private pay clients, probably, to sustain yourself, unless you have
okay,
these other side, gigs, so to speak. So I think taking insurance is you want to get paneled on as many insurance or employee assistance programs as you can. And that takes a lot of time and can take a lot of networking too. And you also probably want to network with, if you would want to go the private pay route. Well, first of all, if you take insurance, you either have to take it or not, because if someone comes to you and has insurance, you can't charge them a private pay rate. You have to take their
yep,
insurance. So if you end up if you decide I'm not going to take insurance at all, then you really are going to have to network with the doctor offices in the area, to get referrals, to get and you're really going to have to spend a lot of time and energy and money on marketing, and probably, and there are consultants out there that will do that kind of a thing, because it's hard you can do it, and if you really have like, a niche, like if you are a trauma specialist and you've gone through all of that training and that's what you want to do, then that's great. Then that's something that you could do. But I think more, if you want to go that route, you probably have to specialize.
gotcha. So I'm gonna ask kind of a follow-up question here, but lead into kind of what your typical day and week look like. So
Sure.
I'll give you my famous two questions at once here thing. So going with the salary, right? It's kind of a scalability issue. If you're in private practice, you only have so many hours in a day you can realistically work. And if you are, say, taking insurance as an example where the rate is set, you get a portion of that percentage. I look at this from the outside and go, okay, this is the most you can make if you're working X hours a week and you have a full client load. So
Sure.
the first part is like, how does someone make more money if they want, or is that enough, right? I say enough, but that's going to be individual dependent. But like, is that a comfortable living? How does someone increase more money? But then if it's easy to lead into it, right? It's a scalability issue with so many hours a day. Tell us what your day and week look like. Right?
Sure.
So
Sure. I think if you consistently were full time, which probably in this business would be anywhere between, I think when I was full time, I was seeing like just under 30 clients a week, which is a lot, but it's doable. That's probably where you're looking. Part time is probably anywhere like between 25 and 30. Maybe around 20 could be considered full time, but maybe I would say a little bit over that. I think if you take insurance, insurance companies can negotiate with you, and you can negotiate your rate with them if you want. So you need to, and I think that's where maybe you would call in someone who has done this before for advice on that, or if someone's going to do your billing, because that can be overwhelming if you're going to bill for all of those clients. So like I have someone that does my billing.
okay,
They might be able to help you try to get more, a higher rate, and you can negotiate with them, because sometimes insurances will say, we have enough providers in your zip code, I'm sorry, we're not going to credential you. And you might have to say, but you don't have that many, or you might have to say, but this is my specialty, or this is what I can offer, so that's a way to make more, for you to increase your income. You certainly could just take private pay clients too, if you only want to take certain insurances and then not all of them, you could do that or take no insurance. You probably that might limit your number of clients though, probably, again, unless you had a specialty that people wanted to go to for, like some people specialize in just seeing like athletes, like that's a specialty, so
Right.
like I said, or the trauma is a big one. And I think you also could, if you felt like you wanted to earn more, you have enough time if you wanted to do something else on the side part, like maybe you, like I like to I don't run groups right now, but that is something I could do on the side if I wanted to bring in more income. I
Gotcha.
could manipulate because my schedule is my own. So you can always do something like that too. Some people teach, it's kind of you sometimes have to get a little bit, creative. You're not going to be a millionaire, certainly. But so that's, that's really not why people go
Investable.
into the profession. Yeah, yeah, right. But you can also, if you get in a good networking group, you can share referrals with people too. I mean, that's a great way to increase your client load. My typical week is I see between 15 and 20. That's kind of the sweet spot for me right now. I'll work mornings, maybe like morning to lunchtime, I have a little break, and then I'll work evenings because that's what most people want, the after 5. After 4:30 is the biggest still. And
Can
then I
I
work.
can I interrupt you real
Oh,
quick?
sure, sure.
Interrupt you real quick. Yeah, are the sessions when you're seeing people, are they typically
Oh,
about 50-minute sessions?
they're typically, yes, it depends. So, most insurances will allow for 53-minute sessions. So I usually will go an hour. I mean, it's hard not to go an hour. I was trained
Yeah, yeah.
back in the day, everything was 45 minutes, which when I have someone who's on an employee assistance program, or some insurances won't cover 60 minutes and it's 45, it seems awfully short to me. That extra 15 minutes matters. But most are at least 53 minutes. Yeah. 45 is the shortest amount. So I schedule folks on the hour to give me 10 minutes to do a quick note or jot something down. So when I do my notes at the end, I remember it's all fresh in my mind. That's the thing. Do your notes. Don't do your notes. You never know who you might be audited. And it's just, you don't want to have a week's worth of notes to do. So, and then I typically work evenings, sometimes till 9:30, which like 3 or 4 days a week. I take Friday nights off. I take Saturdays off. I work Sundays. But I don't mind it. Some people I like to offer variety to folks because not everyone can get in the evening. So then they're like my folks that I can see on the weekends.
Makes sense.
And it seems, yeah.
And then typically when you're doing notes for someone, how long does that process take?
Not that long. Maybe it might be 5 to 10 minutes. I can usually get it done if I have a 15-minute window. I can usually get it done in that amount of time. Yeah, it's not too. Most of the notes that I do are, they're the record makes it easy. It's a lot of clicking and typing too, but the intakes take the most. So I would save. I can't really do an intake note in that short amount of time. So the intakes are usually always an hour, and I'll save those for the end of the evening. But if it's a process note from I'll call it like a subsequent follow-up session, that I can get that done in 10 or 15 minutes.
Excellent. And then if you look at the career as a whole, like what do you find to be the most challenging part of it?
Like every day can be a challenge. It just you just really don't know what clients are going to bring to you. Like it's really never a dull moment, so which I like that. I don't ever get bored. But I think the biggest challenge is just finding time for not finding time for self-care, like at the end of the day, I kind of have this thing where it's like for half an hour, I tell my family, like, I just need to kind of be quiet for 30 minutes, decompress a little bit, um, relax a little bit, and then I can be present for you. I can't go right away. It's hard to go right away from doing it because some days can be really heavy with what people bring. And you're carrying that weight for them. Because they can't right now. So I think it's, making time for, self-care, making time for you is a big one. And that can be challenging when you have your own family.
Was that something that you had to work at getting better at when you first started, or were you generally more naturally inclined to being able to separate?
Yeah, I think when I was younger and I didn't have a family, it was easier for me, and I had colleagues that I saw on a regular basis, so they were kind of all going through the same thing. But it became a challenge with, when I had kids to make sure I have that time, because they needed me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when I started to notice, like, I need a little bit of a, before it was easier to take the break, I had, my time was my own. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I'm going to ask you the flip side of that question now. What do you
Sure.
find to be the most rewarding part of your career?
I love when people say things like, thank you, you're so easy to talk to. This has helped me so much. Just getting positive feedback from them. Not in a way, I'm not doing it to, because I need that. I like knowing that I helped them. Because sometimes especially in the beginning, some therapists have what they call like imposter syndrome. Like, am I helping this person? They're coming in and crying every time. So when I hear that they are, or I just see that they're improving, even if it's just something they've done on their own, like just making that progress, is great, because I love helping people, so I love seeing that.
Excellent. And the next two questions as we start winding down here are going to
Sure.
be very similar, but they're slightly different. So first one is there something in the field that going into it has surprised you, but no one ever tells you about, right? So you just kind of learn by fire, but it's kind of important for people.
I think the biggest one is you can never, which you really never know, even when you do talk to someone on the phone, because sometimes you will maybe talk to a client before you schedule with them, like what you're going to hear, what you're going to get. You really have to be prepared for anything. And you haven't heard it all or seen it all. Just when you think you haven't. And you never want to assume anything in this business. And I always tell my clients, like, I never assume anything. So I have to ask, I don't want to assume this. I think what you're saying is this, because I don't want to assume. But you really have to be prepared to hear anything and everything. I would say, and that's, that was a little, I don't want to say challenging in the beginning, but it could take some getting used to, I guess.
It's probably the worst the very first time it happens, right? If there's something
Yeah,
that is
I
just
think so.
way out in left field.
Yeah. And I think if you, we always say, like, some clients like to give, doorknob confessions. Really nothing's going on, and then they would go to leave and be like, by the way, I'm leaving my husband and moving to Africa tomorrow. And you're like, what? What's happening? They love to give confessions at the door, so that's something that you're kind of like, oh, okay, let's unpack that next time. And I think that's important to, and I tell my clients, I always have to start where they are. We might set all these goals, and everyone, insurance companies, everybody's crazy about goals and objectives, and that's important. But if they come in and they've had a really bad day at work, the goal we set last week isn't going to matter. They have to start about their crappy day at work, So really just being present for them too. And not having to be like, well, I need to get to those goals. Like, so, But it takes, and you start to, I guess you start to notice more, you start to do this more, so you might pick up on more things, but it's definitely with experience you can only get better. Like I guess that's what I was trying to say before too. Like you're always evolving. You can never say like I know everything. I know how to help everyone. You can always learn. You know, you can always be learning.
Excellent. Well said. Jennifer, did I neglect to ask you anything that you feel is important for the audience to know?
I don't think so.
All right. Do you watch the show Shrinking on Netflix?
So I watched the first episode and I couldn't get past the first episode. It was so unrealistic. The first episode, I just couldn't do it. But I follow a page on Facebook, and a lot of our therapists had the same issue. But I do like Couples Therapy on Showtime is a great show. She's a phenomenal therapist.
So I love Shrinking. I think it's hilarious. I will tell you. The whole show is unrealistic, though, right? So
yeah, it is.
It's not just the first episode.
That's TV,
it's all.
That's TV. I'm sure. It's right. Like some attorneys in the group said, "Well, that's law show." So I'm sure if I was an attorney, I would say the same thing about legal shows.
Yeah. I've heard great things about couples therapy, though. You're not the first person to mention that.
It's a great show. She does a group supervision, and she goes to her own therapist. She's phenomenal. The way she's like a master of it. It's great. That's a great show. So that's a show I can watch. The couples are real. It's real, and it's I wanted to like Shrinking, but I just couldn't do it. Maybe I'll watch the second season and skip it. I don't know.
Yeah, if you didn't like the first one,
you
probably won't like the rest of it.
Right.
So I go for the laughs.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, Jennifer, it was a pleasure having you today. If someone wants to reach out, ask you a question. About careers, if they're in the Pennsylvania area, and I say area, it's a huge state. If they're in Pennsylvania, they want to reach out about services. What's the preferred way for someone to get a hold of you? So
they can email me. My email is crossroadscounselingpa@gmail.com.
Perfect. We'll link that in the show notes as well. So Jennifer Maloney, everyone, licensed clinical social worker. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Want to explore other careers or share yours with us? Check out our website. Until next time, go Bills.